I'm Angela Yore.
And I'm Lynda Clarke, and welcome to Why We Lead, the podcast that delves into the stories and insights of impactful leaders
and unsung heroes shaping the fintech world and beyond. Joanne Dewar, thank you so much for being our inaugural guest on Why We Lead, and specifically Why We Lead in Fintech. You've had a great career. Tell us about what you're doing now.
Well, firstly, it's an absolute privilege to be here. So thank you so much for the invite. So what I'm doing now, I have had an exciting journey in the fintech scene for the last, more than a decade. And now I'm leading a pro bono initiative across the industry called Project Nemo. And I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that a bit later on.
Yeah, it's so exciting. That we're all looking forward to hearing what you've done for good in the industry rather than just making money, but it's all about what we're giving back.
So I've watched your journey actually, and I've watched you launch Nemo, and I'm absolutely in awe of everything that you're doing. And when we were talking about this podcast and really what we wanted to kind of talk about and what we wanted to get from it, one of the things that I'm just really interested in is exactly what the title is: Why We Lead. Mm-hmm. So for you, what's important? What does leadership mean to you, and why do you think that you've kind of landed here?
Well, it's been fascinating actually, just stopping and looking at some of these questions and actually asking myself those questions. And I think it wouldn't have necessarily been obvious when I was at school that this is the kind of thing that I would end up doing. I wasn't somebody that was sort of very, very forward. I was sort of probably more introverted, quite studious, serious. But I love making things happen. I love helping people. And I think I get really frustrated with status quo when I think something can be done better. And when I look through my whole life, not just sort of more recent aspects of my career, but through my whole life, I've always been the one that volunteered on the staff student committee or that kind of thing, the representative of the people that's trying to lean in to help make things better. So there's obviously some strands that runs through for me.
And we were talking about this earlier as well, and the whole debate of a leader's born, a leader's create and learn things along the way. Where do you sit on that? Do you feel that it's a natural thing, or do you feel that you kind of train yourself to become that leader?
I certainly think my upbringing had a large part to do with it. My dad was, or still is, a Rotarian. So in the evenings, we were hosting various committee meetings where he's busy organising things, making stuff happen, and we'd be dragged along to various events and charity walks and various things he'd be organising at weekends. And in his job and career as well, actually, he was maybe a different type of entrepreneur, but he really what's now the redevelopment of my hometown, Ipswich, the waterfront area. And he's got a huge amount to be proud of, and he did that not because he was CEO of anything big and not because he had particular resources, but he was very good at relationships and working with people to share a vision and make stuff happen. And I'm very sure and very proud that I'm a chip off his block in that regard.
Definitely.
So, you get where water doesn't get, Joe. I've always said that about you. So now we know where it comes from. It comes from your dad. And obviously your tenacity and drive. But I know a bit about your story, but walk us through your journey. I mean, you've had some really exciting achievements, but you've also had some lower moments as well and things that have gone wrong. But just kind of give us a little bit of a breadth of that journey you've taken.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. And you've been a key part of that story as well in multiple ways. But I think so. I guess, firstly, broadly speaking, my life, my career's split into quite distinct chapters of about a decade each. So I was originally an IT consultant, started with Pricewaterhouse. So I did have that little bit of tech background. I then took a whole 7 years out to raise my 3 children. I just couldn't see a way through of how to be a good mum, wife, and project manager that I was. It was the one kind of job where I couldn't see how you could possibly do it part time. And I did try after I had my first Kirsty. I went back to work and had a project management role that was 4 days a week. But then there would always be people flying in and they'd be only available on the day that I had off, or different things that meant I had to keep finding cover for that day that I thought that I got off. And at the same time, I'd got my daughter in nursery, and I was always the first person to drop off in the mornings, the last person to pick up in the evenings. I'm
I
sure
know
it's a
that
familiar
feeling.
story.
Sounds like my life.
And so you end up feeling that you're not doing, at the same time, I was leaving work sort of as the first person to leave work because you're chasing back for nursery pickup. And so I felt I wasn't really doing any of it well, any of it right. And so when I was then pregnant with Charlotte, my second, and my husband had a secondment to Ireland, and so I didn't have any of the extended parental support. I thought, I just can't see how I'm going to be able to do this. So I let my husband's career take precedent, and I sort of tried to find a way of being a stay-at-home mum. Didn't fit naturally with me at all, and I ended up just taking things on, whether it's organising the mum and baby group, or then when I came back to the UK, I was branch chair of my local NCT, the National Childbirth Trust. But it didn't really sort of scratch my itch. I really wanted to get back to doing something again. And when my youngest started preschool, it was actually my brother-in-law had already started Global Processing Services, and he said, "Well, why don't you come in and just help out a couple of days a week? Nothing big, nothing complicated. Just things were starting to take off, and there was the opportunity to effectively do some process re-engineering to make it smoother to do the onboarding." So that's what I got involved in to start with back in 2013. And that became a 10-year career journey with GPS, where I became, unexpectedly, but became CEO in 2018, ran the company through 2 PE cycles and exited in 22.
For a significant sum of money as well, wasn't it?
It was
Yeah.
it was a major transaction, which more than the sum of money, it was about quite a complicated consortium that we pulled together.
Yeah.
Which was pretty exciting. And so yeah, having left that, I've been thinking about what the next chapter is all about. And for me, it's really about giving back, leveraging my sort of profile and network to try and help the whole industry be the best that it can be.
Yeah. So I think that sort of leads on nicely, doesn't it, to what you're doing now. Anyone in fintech and payments particularly will know, but we're all very passionate about what you've created. So for those of people that don't know, tell us about what you're doing.
So leading an initiative called Project Nemo, and that is seeking to accelerate disability inclusion and accessibility across all of our products and services. I've been part of the D&I scene within fintech, for a long time, since the Payments Association Women in Payments group
Yeah,
that you're
that's
part
right.
of.
Yes.
And so, I'm very aware of the narrative and the activity within D&I in fintech and payments. And really, disability inclusion hasn't had a look in. Nearly everybody's inside their organizations is dealing with D&I in a pretty similar order. And as I lent in personally in our organization in GPS, I wasn't really aware that there was so little else going on. But as I came out and was talking about it more, so many people said, "Oh, you've got to turn this into something. This really matters to me because," in fact, Lynda, we had that conversation even. actually, my son, my daughter, my nephew, my cousin, this is really important. And none of us were really looking at disability inclusion. It's at best fourth on everybody's list and therefore being parked. And at the same time, probably because of that, or certainly there's a chicken and egg to this, we've neglected the accessibility of all of our new products and services. So there's somehow been an oversight where we're somehow thinking that disability equals physical access equals wheelchairs, and in our fintech bubble, we're all digital products and services that can be accessed from home from B2C perspective, and on a B2B perspective, well, there aren't really disabled people around as our customers, therefore we don't really need to think about it, or that there's something along those lines. And so I'm using the opportunity to really get our whole industry to think, actually, we've missed a trick here. We are effectively, we've got a close sign on our shop window as the whole industry, in terms of, how many businesses in our industry are disability confident level 1, which is the government's accreditation program. So we're just not inviting to disabled prospective employees. That's why they're not on our long lists, because we're saying that we're not creating the conducive, inclusive environments. And at the same time, as I say, we've missed a trick on the accessibility. It's a huge market. It's 23% of the population are disabled in some way, shape or form. And also there's a very compelling narrative, not only from B2C perspective, but also B2B as well. So Project Nemo is all about shining that light, making everyone stop and think, have a look at their own businesses, their procedures, their websites, their apps, and see what can be done. And I've been trying to make it in itself accessible, such that anyone in the organization can lean in and make a difference. You don't need to be the CEO to be the one that's starting to call things out within your organization and make that difference.
And how's the response come from the industry?
Oh, overwhelmingly positive. And in a way, it's good that I contained the scope from the beginning, because I said, look, I was aiming to influence UK fintech over a 12-month period. But we've had support from across the industry, to the extent that at Money 2020 in Amsterdam, you were there. We had this 6 meter by 6 meter stand, and we had a brand film that was playing on every stage. And so there was absolutely huge interest from every country, from all sizes of organization. And it would be very easy to get distracted in moving this in lots of different ways, but there's an absolute desire to lean in. But then it gets sort of slightly more nuanced than that, because there's desire to lean in and learn, but there's an absolute sort of question mark as to, but what do we actually mean? What do we actually need to do? And there's still a real sort of reticence in even having the conversation, because what if I say the wrong thing? What if I say sort of person with disability as opposed to disabled person? What if I say low vision versus vision impairment? What if I get things wrong? And the whole thing that I've learnt in the DI journey more broadly, and in particular a few years ago I sort of specifically lent in on our own Black journey, was you just got to be confident to lean in and speak up and say something, because doing something is better than doing nothing. And if you don't get it exactly right, people will soon know if the intent is there to do, to be saying and doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think we often worry about upsetting people, so we say nothing.
Yeah, and that's the worst thing we can do for disability inclusion.
What does success look like for Nemo over the next 12 months? So if you fast forward 12 months and you're sitting there reflecting, what is it that you want to have achieved in the next 12 months?
So I want the industry to give permanent space to the conversation, to make sure that there's an ongoing commit, that at every conference and every event we are continuing the conversation. I really want the organizations to lean in and become disability confident. It's really not a big effort for the first levels, and to really think about the accessibility of their products and services. And one of the things that's really exciting for me, because I couldn't work out how to win the argument on B2B in fintech. But actually, the answer has actually come towards me from the big banks, where they've said, actually, we've been working really hard to make our whole digital and physical estate more accessible. And, we've got, we really value our disabled employees and want to make it, the environment as best it can be for them. And the last thing we want to do is to engage with suppliers who are bringing in new products and services. You've got no excuse because it's a greenfield site what you're building on, and you're bringing new inaccessible things that we're needing to retro upgrade. So that becomes a commercial reason even for the B2Bs, which is really helps it move up the to-do list.
Yeah, and regardless if it's B2B or B2C, there's a person at the end of that.
Absolutely.
I'm really interested. So just stepping back into your journey. So you went from kind of, and I've tried to do this myself as well. So when you were talking, I was reflecting on my time of going back to not going to work and becoming the stay-at-home mum, which honestly did not go well for me at all. I was a bit like you, going through and thinking, okay, I think I started my own business making baby gifts because I just couldn't not focus on
Mhm.
something. So when you went back into GPS, you've been doing project management, and you fast forward, I think you said 10 years, you're CEO of GPS. How did that happen? What kind of journey did you go on? Obviously, I can see so many leadership qualities as you're talking, and even as you're talking about as a child, I can see those nuggets there of how that's developing. But how did you go from going back into work from the project management role? Fast forward, you're selling, getting major investors into the business. You're a CEO, really successful one that's driven that business forward over a decade. How did that happen? What was that journey?
So, literally, what happened was I was starting with creating process improvements for implementations, and trying to come up with a methodology that meant that not every implementation was sort of a unique, bespoke activity, so that could be more easily repeated. And then I could start, I could see how to improve things and what to do next. And then it was almost like being cogs, each department's like cogs in a machine. And it's, if only I could look after operations as well as implementations, then I could get those cogs working together a bit better. And then from that, we spawned the account management, and all of these departments spawn as one person. And it's like, okay, take that hat off. And you can get somebody in that really knows how to do that piece. And so really it was a desire to think I could keep seeing, well, if only I looked after that bit as well, then that would work with each other better. And the confidence grew from Tony and Craig, the founders as well. They could see the impact I was having. It was good for business. We were growing like a rocket ship. The responsibilities extended. Then as we sought to get the first round of investment, 2017, 2018, I accompanied Tony on the pitching rounds, and all of the investors sort of took me on board as part of the journey. I think at the time, I know at the time, it's quite interesting. There's a lot of people that don't look at me and think I'm the natural CEO. I'm not somebody that is pushing myself out there. And in fact, at the time, the contract that I signed in 2018 said interim CEO. And I refused for that to be my public title. Because at the time, I was about to go into quite a difficult set of contract renegotiations with Revolut, which would ultimately be, me with Nick. And if I was, and it wasn't even an interim, it was acting CEO, I think. And if it was going to be acting, then that would completely undermine my credibility
yeah.
for any form of negotiation. And so I said, look, I need to actually have it as the CEO. I'm either CEO or I'm not. Later down the line, my chairman said, "Yeah, you absolutely are. You're twice the CEO I ever imagined you were going to be." And then just before we got the next transaction over the line in 2022, I kind of remembered that what was in my contract, and I said to my head of HR, "Do you think we can just go back to my contract and make sure it just says that I'm actually CEO?"
Did they ever say why? Why was it acting or interim or?
They just wanted me to prove myself, and like I hadn't already.
Yeah, it's like one of those things where you have to do the job, then we'll give you the job.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
exactly.
not, to say anything about anyone in particular, but, I'm a governor at my son's school, and we were in exactly the same position with lady there who was given the job as acting head, not head. Do you think it's because, like you say, there's certain alpha characteristics? You didn't say that, I'm saying that. There's certain alpha characteristics that are seen more to be CEO like, yet actually, what does make a really good CEO?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We did, I'm trying to think of the name of it now, but we did one of these management away day things, which looks at a color wheel and it look
Yeah.
at personality types.
Yeah, like this.
Yeah, and it wasn't it's not gendered, but there's a sort of a common thread that the sort of the alpha characters were all this kind of red color, and that's very typical for leaders. And I shine through as a green.
Mm.
So it's not necessarily the gendered difference, but certainly from an approach difference. I'm a very people-centric person. And that's very unusual in the CEO sense, but where it works best and where I had it, and you saw it working really well, is I had a very strong team around me. And in fact, a lot of them were red. And they almost played a protecting role. So they really valued my people centricity and the desire to do right by others, and they did a lot to sort of protect and support me. And they had that sort of more fiery element. I think the piece that I've learned in a couple of things I've learned in hindsight, certainly when anyone sees, I think particularly women, but see someone that's very sort of smiley and affable, they underestimate that core of steel. And sometimes you need to just sort of bare your teeth a bit to be able to say, no, I don't underestimate me, and certainly I, don't try anything on. Yeah, and I think the other thing I've learned is it's really important to communicate exactly the why you're doing things as well as what you're doing. If I was to reflect on, I've jumped around in terms of questions, but if I'm to reflect on, things where they could have gone differently, one of my friends talked about it being the Sleeping Beauty fairy godmother, meaning that sometimes you need, in Sleeping Beauty, the fairy godmother turns, someone being killed to sleeping for 100 years. Now, if you didn't know that was to protect you from being killed, then actually somebody making you sleep for 100 years is a pretty bad thing.
Yeah.
And so, one of my big lessons learned was, really to make sure I'm, communicating the why behind lots of things and making sure you're communicating things widely, and then that keeps the team on board as to.
I love hearing that because my favorite video that I make everybody watch is the Simon Sinek
Start with
why. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's just so powerful when people really understand why and understand the reasons behind things. They're much more likely to come along for the journey.
Yeah, I think because particularly a CEO, you have some pretty stinky decisions to make, and you can't protect everybody all of the time, and you can't, please everybody all the time. So, and, particularly through COVID and things was tough. And I think the more you can actually explain this is where we are actually at, and, these are the choices in front of you, and these are the reasons for making the choices, then it helps keep everyone aligned and on board.
What's your hardest moment there? What kind of hardest or and proudest moments?
I think the hardest was we were running a high growth SaaS business with no primary capital. So when COVID hit, the RP company at the time, their instinct was to batten down the hatches and, cancel and close down whatever they could. And we just got going in Asia Pac. And the last thing I wanted to do was, put that at risk. They were in favour of just closing it back down.
Is that when you started looking? Did you start at that point to look elsewhere for other investment, or did you all together, including the investors, do that?
Yeah, it was me and the team that did it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where we realised we needed to get partners on board that could see the journey and the potential that the organisation had, and get the right people around the table to support us on the journey.
I mean, you've been and are a really good leader in fintech. Is there anything specifically you think that makes a great fintech leader over, other sectors? What sort is it? Grit? Is it agility? What do you think are the main skills that you think that got the growth that you got, and that your funding that you got, and all those things that you had to balls that you kept juggling? And I guess I'm answering a question myself here, but, one thing I noticed about working with you, because we did work together in terms of quite closely for a while, was you always put your hands up if you didn't know something. You were always willing to listen to advisors, but then you'd always make something better out of a situation, like you'd add and enhance to it. And I loved working with you as a result of that. And I think we did some of our best work because we were both good. You can't, everyone has to be good, don't they? I always say that, and I always think of you when I say that to other people.
That's really kind, and I loved it as well. I think again, as a CEO, you're not actually better than anyone at any of their jobs in your team. And so you're a little bit of a jack of all trades, but what you absolutely need to do is be able to empower everybody in the team to get the best out of them. And the thing that you need to be able to do, I called it harnessing the huskies, which is you can't just let everyone move off in different directions. So you do need to sort of pull the reins lightly in order to make sure everyone's moving in the same direction. But, you get the best out of everyone when you've given as much empowerment as possible. But I think beyond that, leadership in fintech in particular involves two things. One's grit and the other's collaboration. Now, grit to start with. In fintech, you're either running a rocket ship or a roller coaster. But either way, there's G-force applied. It's high pressure, and there are downs as well as ups. And you really need to be able to dig deep, and you want to have a team around you that similarly will dig deep. And it's kind of tied to the collaboration point, because I think unlike other industries, there is such deep dependencies on a large number of partners to get anything done, both to get live in the first place, but then also to be able to manage your product, your service in the market. Things will come at you from any direction at any time of day or night. We talk about payments never sleeps. It's genuinely the case. And, you need partners that you can rely on, in those really tricky moments to help get you through. And you can't predict what those things are. And 90% of that comes down to relationships and working together. And so actually, the partnerships and the way the whole industry works, it's not really about the what of your product, the features and functionality. It's really not about the price points. It's about, right, who would you want by your side? Because this is going to be a roller coaster, and there are going to be moments. And, those moments, if you haven't got the right partner by your side, you're going to be dead in the water. You think of things like the Wirecard crisis
I was
that
going
we
to say
went
exactly
through.
that. Yeah.
We had
It's
42 clients and 5 million cardholders suspended over 5 days. They were absolutely make or break moments for those clients. Um, so uh, so leadership in fintech, as I say, so that grit and sort of resilience
that was a
to deal
moment,
with
I
things.
think, along with many others, but because sometimes I guess you're fighting more that every day must feel, not every day, but some days are like a bungee jump, because, things are coming at you as well. But that whole Wirecard thing, that did take a lot of collaboration with a lot of different partners in order to be able to navigate. Kind of remember, there's so many stakeholders involved.
Yeah.
But you guys were central to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In terms of the number of clients impacted, and fortunately, we were able to see, say bits of good come out of it. But most clients came through, and we were then able to support them. I talk about it like transitioning them from one ship to another to continue on their journeys. The Wirecard vessel was stranded, and they needed to move on to other EMI vehicles in order to be able to continue on their journeys.
You spoke earlier about your father being kind of someone perhaps shaped and molded some of your leadership skills that we see. Who else do you look up to in not just our industry, but just globally, wherever? Who inspires you as a leader? What qualities do you admire about them?
I'm going to answer this slightly differently because it will help understand where I sort of started really building some confidence in leadership. When in 2020, we all remember where we were with COVID. I was around Christmas time. I was in isolation with a mattress on the floor in my study because I'd got COVID and I'd come back from a trip from Dubai just before. And I watched a presentation by an author called Rob Cross, and it's called "The Great Man is Dead." And what it is about, what it identifies, is that we all tend to look up to, as leaders, the great orators. And many of us will sort of list the Barack Obama or someone like that as a great leader. That's what leadership looks like. And the minute we do that, we make it almost unattainable for most of us mortals to ever achieve that level of clarity and articulation. And Rob Cross's central tenet was actually, you don't need to be the great orator. If you've got passion and purpose and authenticity, you can be a good leader. And that was a real sort of moment for me because I was busy trying to figure out how we were going to sort of navigate the strategic direction of the organization. And, we have those moments of, I can't quite see how I'm going to be able to do this. And I watched his talk and then read the book, and I can do this. I would really recommend that book to anybody to be able to think, right, you can find your own style of leadership if you've got those things. And I think the most important is to, be authentic, be true to yourself. Don't try and be somebody that you aren't or can't be, because people will see through that.
I think all good leaders also back themselves, and to inspire confidence in others, you have to have an element of self-confidence yourself. To me, you're very self-confident, but we were at Money 2020 when you did your first public engagement. That was a really interesting journey, wasn't it, for you?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's funny. I mean, there's slightly different things whether you've got an ego versus an inner belief in yourself.
Mm.
But I was terrified of public speaking. And I didn't really think I got anything interesting to say. I didn't think I knew the industry. I didn't think I knew much about payments.
Yeah.
And, it genuinely, the process of I started attending the Women in Payments events back in 2017, 2018, I think they were. And then there was an opportunity with EWPN at Money 2020 in 2019. They created some little micro speaking slots where you can just talk about your journey. And I stood up and gave a first talk, 15 minutes. It's just who I am, and found my feet with public speaking. And
She had us all in tears.
I-
by the way.
I mean, I've heard you
I've got-
speak quite a
I've-
few times,
I've
and
got
I
a
wouldn't
habit
have
of that.
thought that for 1 minute that
No,
you
but I
weren't.
think
No,
it's great to say because
confident.
it shows that
it is.
it gives others the opportunity to say, look what
Exactly.
you can do in such a short period of time.
Exactly. It really wasn't that long ago. And before that, and going back to, say, the Women in Payments event, if I was at that event, if I was just feeding back the table feedback back to the main room, I was nervous as hell. Or putting my hand up in a round table type environment to say something or question to a speaker, even sat in the audience, I'd be terrified of doing so. But honestly, so much of it was to do with, funny to use the word, but the tribe, those that were around me, including yourself, and the number of the others that were in the group as well. Nadia played a huge role. She invited me onto her podcast early on and made me feel that I'd got something to say and, was of interest. And then from there, I picked up a couple of speaking slots at a conference. First one was just moderating a panel. I knew the other panelists, which helped. I did my research and I thought, well, if I'm moderating, then I'm not going to get asked any difficult questions because I'm the one asking the questions. And I think, in the big conference speaking bits, I kept thinking, there's no way I could go because there'll always be someone in the room that knows more than me and they're going to put their hand up from the back and call me out. And then you need to just get out of that monkey brain and start thinking, actually, 99% of the people in the audience are there willing you on. They're thinking, well, they can never do that. And, you're genuinely talking on topic you know something about. Don't ever accept a speaking slot where you're winging it. You either got to know your stuff and or do the work. You're always very good at that. But the audience is there on your side. And, the more people we can encourage to get out there and talk, I couldn't have achieved any of what I'm doing with Project Nemo now if I hadn't have found my voice. And there are, hundreds and hundreds of people out there that we just need to encourage to find their voices. And in finding their voices, the first steps can be inside the organization and very small moves. So just organizing a lunch and learn and talking about your hobby. It doesn't need to be complicated, but as anything, public speaking is a muscle that you need to build, and
Leadership, for sure.
over time it becomes a little bit less daunting. I mean, certainly for the first 10 speaking slots, I kept a little list going.
I remember your Sky
Me
News
talking about it.
interview.
Oh God.
The amount of preparation, it was during COVID, wasn't it? And it was
Yeah.
when GPS had got, what was this story? Was it MasterCard?
We'd got the Visa investment.
Visa
so we were doing
investment,
then,
that was
yeah.
it. But it's quite amazing to think about, you came across brilliantly on that, but you put a hell of a lot of work into it, didn't you?
Yeah, no, I have to say that was a level of being scared all of its own. I thought, and now I think, well, if I can do that, I can do anything. But fortunately, I didn't, before going on Sky News, look up. I did think about Googling, nothing that bad's going to happen. You're not going to faint or be sick or anything on live television. Fortunately, I didn't actually Google it because there have been a few. But Jenny, what I was going to say before that, I did keep a table going for the first 10 speaking slots. And I told myself, yeah, I've done one and that went okay. right, 2 out of 2 have gone okay, 3 out of 3 have gone okay, 4 out of 4 have gone okay. And, that's what helped build the confidence.
And I guess this year you must have done already 50 plus, I would imagine.
I've got 30 panels over the course of this year. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's quite a few.
Definitely well practiced now.
Yeah.
So I guess what advice would you give to, somebody who's like yourself, you felt that fear, but you still did it. What advice would you give to somebody else who's embarking on that journey, that leadership journey now?
A lot of it is doing the work to find out who you are and, and really what you are passionate about. I'm somebody, there was a self-help book that I found called, actually it was Samit that recommended it to me. It's called Finding Your True North. And it's a bit of a workbook, and it kind of just helps you think about, your life to date and what's important to you. And,
I love that book.
who your personal board is, who you can get best advice from around you, which is different to people who are just going to agree with you. And what is your why, and, where you want to go and how you can get there. I think it's really worthwhile.
What's his
sort of
name?
doing the work.
Something George. I can't remember his surname though. But, his first name. He's a Harvard business. Bill George. That's it. But I was one of the things that happened to me, just anecdotally, the other week I was in a workshop, and we were talking about the guiding North Star and using it to workshop something for this particular person. And he brought out a photograph of himself with Bill, and I nearly died. I mean, you've actually met him. It feels like it's one of my idols. But
Yeah, no, I think it's funny. It's one of these things that you don't really, unless you do it very consciously and deliberately, you don't tend to do to stop and think, right, where am I actually going? Or even, what are my values? It was only really when I stopped to do the sort of the mission, vision, values, culture definition work when I first became CEO at GPS, that it really made me stop to think, right, so what is it that I actually stand for? Where do I want my life to go? And, what does make me tick?
I think that is a difference between kind of leaders that kind of manage and they're just running around versus real, what I'd class as real, true seasoned leaders. They have values, they hold themselves to them, and they're accountable for those. And I think it's good to hear that people are spending time thinking about that. I'm pushing my team constantly to think about, okay, what's your purpose? What's your why? What's your leadership values? So, Jo, what trends do you see cutting through where you think will need leadership to succeed in this industry?
I think one of the interesting things is that ESG is very often seen to be a bolt-on. So you're sort of focused on all your financial metrics and strategy and other things. And it's like, there's a bit of an afterthought.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you need to think about ESG. I think the leaders that get it right are not focused on the money. What they're focused on is doing right by the customers, doing right by the team. And as a consequence of both of those things, they're getting very high satisfaction and retention from both a customer and an employee perspective. And ultimately then the money, the growth, the profitability of the company will take care of itself and, sustainably for the long term. And I think, what I really look forward to is seeing more organizations addressing it that way around. I think particularly in fintech, where there's so many organizations that are VC and PE backed, where money is front and center, and making money is sort of the primary thing being discussed around the board table. We can lose sight of that, but I think the strongest leaders will be able to satisfy their shareholders, satisfy their backers, because they're getting the results. But how they achieve that isn't by internally focusing on the results, it's internally doing the right thing by the customers, partners, and employees.
I like that.
I totally agree with that. I
And I-
totally agree with that, because you look at anyone that's got that's focused on the money, it's soulless, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
just, we all come to work for a purpose.
Yeah.
We all do what we do for some form of purpose. And if we don't, we're lost.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. And I think the more we can showcase and get behind the organizations that are doing well by doing good, the more we can sort of change that mindset to say, right, actually, so the cookie cutter, the next few companies that we need to find to invest in are the ones that have got the raw ingredients of doing good. So they're doing, they're very sort of purposeful about the way that they are interacting with their customers, partners, and staff. And they're the ingredients that we are looking for, that we're going to invest in for the financial outcome.
So what do you think needs to change in fintech? Do you think you've seen a change in over time, or what do you think needs to change that mindset?
I think across the industry we need to be aware of the narrative that we're creating. I think the examples are there, and I think we should be highlighting and making more of a big deal about those examples, those positive examples of doing well by doing good. And that by nature will encourage more to follow suit.
Yeah. Not just an afterthought where you're just planting a few trees.
Yeah, exactly.
Very nice. And then, we've all seen good and bad leadership. What have you learned from poor leadership?
So for me, there's a few examples that come to mind, and they all involve PowerPoint. The examples that have frustrated me most in being led or being managed, because I think we're then into, someone being a manager as opposed to a real leader, is when you've put a huge amount of effort into a very loose spec for something, and then it gets ripped apart. But they weren't able to articulate what it was before. But once you've actually put something in front of somebody, it's then, well, they don't want that, but it's not what they had in mind, but actually what you're providing serves exactly the same purpose. So I can think of a few different times in my life where, you've had that moment of the PowerPoint being ripped to shreds, and
Yeah, well, that's not what I asked for.
yeah.
Okay.
I must say, I feel guilty you saying that. There's been times whereby I don't think I've provided full clarity, but I have worked on that. I've worked to be clearer about what I want in the first place. Not in a minutiae, but set out the right sort of framework for people first before.
Well, exactly. And that comes down to a couple of things. It's either, providing the framework, being very clear on requirements, or empowering in order to say, look, you're providing a very sort of loose sort of request, but then sort of listened carefully to what's being presented back to you. And it might not look exactly what you had in mind, but if it's delivering on the brief, if it's sort of serving its purpose, then it may be, just as good.
Yeah. So maybe that attitude of it's my way or the highway is not it's the attitude of seeing there's different ways to skin a cat here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, exactly that. And the final point, which is exactly what you're saying, is, there are always learnings. And whenever something hasn't worked quite as well as it could have done, actually doing the work yourself, recognizing how things could be better and doing the work on yourself.
Definitely.
So I have one kind of final question. Why do you lead?
I think I want to make a difference in the world, and I enjoy that. I enjoy helping others. I believe that I have huge privileges, but one of the many is that I can carry a heavier load than others. Got quite broad shoulders, and I really genuinely enjoy using that to help other people.
And helping other people, you certainly are with Project Nemo. It's just absolutely brilliant to watch. And I think you talked about kind of only doing public speaking a few times. I think I've seen you many times over the last year doing things, and I look forward to seeing you more this year.
So we will ask you to write down the name of the person that you think would make a great guest and would inspire others for this. So, and how we'll get them on the show. So I'll ask you your advice on that. But have you got anything else before we finish any lasting comments, or maybe what would you go back and tell your younger self now, knowing what you know now and with the experience you've got?
So I think a couple of things. I think generally in terms of final comments, we've spoken sort of a little bit about leadership and being CEO, but the two are separate. Anybody can be a leader at any level in an organization. Leadership is something that it's an influence of those around you, and genuinely you can do that. I mean, look at what Chris Foster's doing. And what would I tell my younger self? Think big. I think that there's more that you can achieve than you think if you do more to back yourself. Yeah,
that's a really nice way to finish. Thank you so much for coming on, Jo.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, that was good, wasn't it?
Starting your own podcast. From concept to production and launch, Sky Parlour Productions can bring your vision to life. Contact info at skyparlour.com today to get started.